so let's go in presentation mode. So yeah, I would like today to go through a little bit of my background and present you briefly different perspectives on what we can do with a translation background in the corporate world, but not only. So I'm a business developer at Dell Technologies, and I'll go through what it means later on in the presentation. I invite you to ask as many questions as you would like, and if we don't have time by the end of the session, I would be really happy to follow up through LinkedIn, for instance. So a little bit about background. BA in International Studies in the UK, and then a Master in Terminology and Translation, both English and Spanish at the same time in France. I'm a French national living in the UK. As part of this master, I had to do a 6-month internship. Then, of course, and I was really lucky after that, it transferred directly into my first job in a full-time job. To pitch you the landscape at the time, we would receive things by fax machine, and Trados 1 or even beta version was the general CAT tool, the only CAT tool in the market. So what I would like to share with you on that slide is what it meant as a junior translator for me at the time. So I was really self-reliant in my academic knowledge plus paper dictionary. So it was a very kind of solitary type of work, and in a very hierarchical and vertical type of organization. And everything that has been described as today's corporation is not the reality I had at the time. I would love to start in such a well-organized type of corporation that was depicted by the other speakers here. So basically I would receive the work, a file and a deadline, and off you go with no real context, but you would execute, and when the project was completed, a more senior, experienced linguist would have a look, make comments, you would integrate the comment and deliver and move on to another file. So it was a really excellent type of exercise and practice to improve my technical understanding of what translation means in the corporate real world. But after, a few months or maybe 1 year, I got bored because I thought, what is my perspective? I'll become a better translator, and then what? So that's really something I would like to invite you to think about as you are trying to find your path in this localization / translation world. What does that mean for you in terms of context? And for instance, what sort of company or what sort of context you want to operate in, whether you're a localizer, tester in the gaming industry, literature, legal translator, it doesn't really matter. What truly matters, reflecting back on my experience, is which context I operate in. What are the values of the company? What career perspectives do they offer? What sort of training? Do they even value training and career discussions? What is the sort of management you would be working on? There is a common theme that says you don't leave a company, you leave a manager, but you also are attracted by a manager or management style. So by knowing yourself more, what is it working well for you? What are you expecting from your management? Mentoring, coaching? Are you expecting be providing instructions and clear guidance? Do you want to have some sort of freedom, etc.? That's really important type of fundamental questioning that reflecting back on my experience, I wish I had wondered, and things that are typically very overlooked. So now I would like to go through the shift in my career. So I started really as whether I was a junior or experienced translator, the first step of my experience was production. So that's something that was described earlier as the execution phase. So I was focusing on the what. So what am I asked to do? What am I asked to translate or convert into another language, and how to deliver it? What are the deadlines, etc. So it was really focused on translation execution, on the quality, which is good because it's a continuation of the academic excellence I was educated in. So paying attention to details, paying attention to the grammar, the syntax, the tone, the style, the length for character restrictions, the terminology, of course, the guidelines from the client. In that sense, it was really good. And I became a better translator. But I was hitting the wall again. What is it next for me? And that's something I invite you to do, that after a while, just like challenge the statu quo and maybe push the boundaries and create your own career opportunities. That's what I did in the second stage, that what I called expand. And I wanted to see the bigger picture. And interestingly, by being a freelancer, I was seeing the other side of the business. And this is where, interestingly, I gained more freedom. I gained self-awareness, accountability, time management. I learned how to say no to clients, no when it was too risky, when it was not at the right price, when the conditions were not good for me. I also learned to pitch my added value, my brand, and also maybe articulate my added value for my clients. And this is where I started to really understand also that translation is not just about the instructions from my client. It was a little bit more, much more than that, like what's happening before, what's happening after. And I touched here about the big picture, the holistic view of what translation is about. And I pushed that to the next level. This is the advice stage, let's say, and where I pushed consulting and engagement. And I didn't do that as a freelancer. I was actually hired by one of my clients, and I found it quite comfortable to go back in the corporate world. Being a freelancer brought me freedom, agility, variety that I didn't get earlier in my career. But having 3 small children, like less than 5 years old, I found it quite challenging to be a freelancer. So again, that really depends on the tax and all the financial constraints you have around you. For me, it didn't work so much in the end. After 5-6 years, I decided to go back to the corporate world. And this is where I was able to put in practice all the things I had learned as a freelancer. So I offered more consulting and engagement role. So this is where, by building a team, starting as a reviewer in this company, Dell EMC Corporation at the time, I started to provide questioning, like challenging things. Why is it that you're doing that much? Do you have only one supplier? Are you satisfied with that supplier? How about having multiple suppliers so we can balance the workload and maybe challenge the quality we get? Where are the TMs? You know, basic things that were not there at the time in the company. So we structured things, and I built a team, and we created the concept in that company of good enough, just in time, fit for purpose. So you don't buy quality at the same price, depending on what it is meant for. We also learned in this company to put in place the principle of anticipating issues and suggest alternatives. So our customers and our users were taking the best out of translation. So, and then that was still not enough for me. I wanted to influence earlier in the chain. So now I understood the life cycle of translation. I was questioning the why, the what for. So what is good? How is good? But why are we even translating? Why this way? Why with this tool? What is it for? Who is going to use it? Who's going to use the translation? Isn't even used at all. Do we have metrics and KPIs? Do we collect the feedback not only from our internal stakeholders, just like marketing, etc., but do we know what our customers and clients want? So that's the role I'm currently in, my 4th level of growing in my career. That's where I'm at. I don't know what the next steps are. But right now I'm focusing on transformation. So I sit within Dell Technologies. I sit in the translation team. We are more or less 40 people. We have generally we have project managers who typically do not have linguistic background, but we also have language quality managers in that team, and all of them have a linguistic background, and they take care of the queries from our translation suppliers. They act as the last voice of the customer. They do arbitration. They set the quality expectations, etc., and they of course do quality assurance. So those team members do have a linguistic background, but the project managers don't. What was missing in that team was the education portion of our stakeholders. So when you're a freelancer, your stakeholder is your client. At Dell Technologies, I'm on the client side. So my stakeholders are HR, IT, the legal department, marketing, sales, pre-sales, product developers, security, ops, etc. They all need translation at some point. They all have different expectations and needs and unique needs. So I build program with them and for them using best practices of procurement. I also work with procurement. I also define with the stakeholders who are going to be the final end user of the content that's translated. That can be an e-learning, that can be a contract for a law firm or a council, that can be a patent with IP, so intellectual property, that can be a user guide, that can be an admin guide, that can be a document for the government. It can be many different things. Some needs are ad hoc, one-off, some needs are recurring, and we make it a program. So that's where I work with the stakeholders on educating on what we need as a translation team to do our best, to work in the best condition possible. So having visibility on the forecast, agreeing on deadline and SLAs, setting some context, getting reference materials, establishing what formats would work best for the integrity of the text. So for instance, please do not provide me an Excel sheet, but the resource file, the properties file, if it's a software, has it been internationalized? Has localization been taken into account when the product has been developed? So we work with developers and designers and architects up the chain, where at the very start of when the product and the features are developed. The second aspect of my role is to strategize around language. And I would like to give you here just one example. Dell has a brand that is quite well known from gamers, at least my children know it very well. It's Alienware. So it's high-end, really powerful, and quite expensive brand of gaming PCs. And if I put myself in the shoes of a client who wants to buy an Alienware product, I go to the Dell.com website. It's available in 30 languages. Then I would say I'm going to shop, and the e-commerce website is localized in 27 languages. And then I would like to download the technical documentation, 30 languages, but slightly different combination. Then I would say, oh, I need support. Then it's 17 languages available. And then if I really have a serious issue and I want to engage with chat, it's 8 languages. Why is that? It's creating a disruptive user experience. And this is the type of work I do with the product owners in the company. Of course, there are always good reasons for this disjointed experience. Most of the time it's cost, the products are not internationalized, etc. But that helps build a strategy over several years. And the last portion of the transformation type of work I'm doing with Dell Technologies is engage with the stakeholders on modernization. And it's a big word, but it's very important. And I can give you just 2-3 examples. One would be introduce automation. So how can we plug our translation management system into the back end of where the content is created, whether it's an emailing campaign, there is a CMS system where the content resides, or when it's a financial type of report that we need to translate, how can we plug into Salesforce.com, for instance, where the data comes from, to avoid back and forth of email and file transfer. That's one way of automating. Another way of automating would be to introduce machine translation. And here it can be a little bit scary, especially with the linguistic background. So, oh my God, why MT? Well, actually, MT has really pros and cons, but from the corporate perspective, it really helps drive the cost down. And with the savings we do, or cost avoidance, we can reinvest by providing more languages or more content to our customers. MTPE, machine translation plus post-editing, is the baseline at Dell Technologies. This is how we deliver most of our content, with the exception of high-end, very sexy type of content, but most of it includes machine translation. And some of it, like knowledge-based articles or solutions on public website, we want to push raw machine translation. And for that, that's the third portion of the modernization. We want to, and I want to, influence how we write the content. Instead of trying to fix machine translation, how can we make the source content better so the output of the machine is better by itself, by nature, organically? So that's my current job. Now, if I look at my junior self, if I were to get hired by Dell Technologies, being a graduate, this is the type of job description that I would get. So I wanted to share that with you. And in the presentation, you have 2 links. I invite you, if you feel like you would like to have a look and search in our job database, you can go through those 2 links. So just one note here. Our team, our translation team at Dell Technologies, does not currently have any open positions, but you never know, so you can have a look. In this slide, you have 2 blocks of text, so it's kind of verbose, but what you have on the left is quite, I think, from what I have heard from the different speakers here and what I know from the industry, it's quite common. As you start in your job, those would be typical tasks you would be asked to do. So execute the jobs, of course, paying attention to the finance and being able to do a reporting on how much you've spent and are you spending diligently. Be familiar with the process, and as a junior person, make sure that you apply the best practices and the guidelines that are in place in the company. As you grow in your role, there is room, of course, for questioning things, improving, making suggestions. But in the beginning, I think what is expected is a person that is self-sufficient, autonomous, by just applying what's in place. Of course, having some interest in the variety of the technologies that are at hand every single day, like a TMS system, for instance. Most importantly, and this is where I would like to finish, most importantly, what Dell is looking at when screening resumes is the soft skills, the attitude, and, for instance, the level of attention to details, being well organized, have a time awareness. By that, I mean, with the variety of tasks you're assigned in a day-to-day, be cognizant, be aware of how much time it takes you. Some people are very quick in executing certain types of tasks and take longer for others, need more thinking, like a solitary time to think and process information, to deliver something. So having this awareness of where you spend your time to make sure you meet your deadline is really, really an important skill that we're looking for. Another one, and that was said before, by Eva, for instance, is communication. Corporate communication is quite different from general communication. There is a tone of voice. Every company or team has their own expectations and policies, etc. But in general, in the corporate world, you're expecting to be able to communicate your expectation, your needs, and your intention in a professional way. And this is something that's important. We have other things here, but the most important one is the Dell values. And this is where, when you look for a job, it's really a good hint to have a look at their social responsibility or value or who we are section on their website to discover more about what's driving the company. At Dell, they being management, the C-level, C-suite management takes very seriously their own values, and they embody their value on a daily basis. Whether it's time for yourself, work-life balance, tolerance for noise in the background, especially working from home. There is really a lot of freedom and trust there, and the values from Dell are also related about integrity and diversity, respect and diversity. So those are really well embodied and day to day. And when we hire, this is what we're looking for. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer through the chat. Or continue the conversation through LinkedIn. I'll be happy to connect with you.